everyone, and welcome back to our Golden 20s podcast. My name is Teagan, and I am doing another little solo episode. But do not worry, Sadie and I will be reunited back together next week. So do not fret. This is the last of a solo for a little while. But I'm very, very excited because today is a very special episode. I'm going to be talking all about movies, which if you know me, you know that I love movies. This is 20 movies to watch in your 20s. And this is really perfect. One, because it's like pouring rain outside. If you hear thunder, that's what's going on. And watching movies is my favorite rainy day activity. I've got like a cozy sweater on right now, and I'm just really feeling the vibes. Number two, as I just said, I love movies. I went to film school twice. So I do feel qualified to talk about this, which is nice because there's some episodes where we're talking about something and I'm like, I don't really know. And like, am I the right person to talk about this? But this episode, I know that I am. I'm the right person to talk about this. So I think we can just dive right in. These are 20 essential movies to watch in your 20s. I will say I'm a woman, so I do feel like they're skewed towards like the woman 20s experience. But I do think that there's some value in men watching these too. So the first movie I'm going to bring up is one of my favorite movies of all time. If you know me, you know I'm obsessed with this movie, and that's La La Land. And I pulled a quote about La La Land from the website MovieWeb. It says, in almost all cases, lots of people in life must work jobs that they don't like in order to provide for themselves. In the process, they discover who they are and how talented they are. They may even discover love along the way. Totally true. I feel like this movie sums up towards like the end of your 20s. For people who don't know, it's about a couple who meet and fall in love while trying to achieve their dreams. And it's about how tough it is to balance your dreams, especially when a lot of times that has to be your number one priority over relationships. And just how difficult it can be to be in a relationship with someone who's a creative, to be honestly trying to achieve your dreams, and how embarrassing and lonely it feels when you're not achieving them. This is just, I think, a movie that everyone needs to watch. I love it so much. And it's so beautiful. The costumes are great. The music's great. It's the perfect, like, lazy Sunday soundtrack. So I love, love, love La La Land. This is my like number one essential. If you don't watch any other movies, that's fine, but turn off this podcast and watch La La Land because I love it so much. Another movie that actually came up a lot when I was researching this episode that I've only watched once is Frances Ha. And I was like, duh, this is the quintessential life in your 20s movie. This is starring Greta Gerwig, who, if you don't know, is the person who wrote and directed Barbie, which is very cool. And this is a quote from Screen Rant about Frances Ha. For any 20-somethings experiencing an existential crisis about the direction their life is or isn't taking, this movie is for them. An updated portrayal of New York for the millennial generation. So Frances Ha is about a fledgling ballerina who, after spending all of her college years in Brooklyn, she's trying to figure out her life, and it's about how her friends are kind of moving on and growing up, and she doesn't quite know how to do that, and how awkward and how weird it feels. It's just another indie, beautiful movie about how like awkward and heartbreaking your 20s can be, but kind of like La La Land, I do find it quite motivational. Another movie I saw come up a lot for essentials to watch in your 20s is Lost in Translation. And this is about an aging actor, Bill Murray, who befriends a young college graduate played by Scarlett Johansson while she's in Japan to shoot an ad. And it's really about loneliness and how unexpected friendships can sort of come up. And it's an older movie, but very, very beautiful. It's kind of a juxtaposition of a midlife crisis with a quarter life crisis, and how the themes are kind of the same. The next movie on my list is one that I've talked about before, and it's Before Sunrise. And really, I feel like the entire Before trilogy could be on this list, but Before Sunrise is the one that's set in your 20s, so that's why it's the one that's on my list. It's a romantic drama that takes place over the course of one night in Vienna. And the plot is that Jesse, an American traveler, runs into Celine, a French student, on a train, and he convinces her to get off the train and spend the night with him in Vienna, just walking around, because he's never been there and she has. And the entire movie, they just walk around the city, they talk about life, love, and they form a really deep connection. Watching this movie feels like what falling in love feels like. It's a beautifully shot movie. It makes Vienna look amazing. I think it really highlights the unexpected magic of traveling, which I feel like is a big theme in your 20s, and how the most random connections can turn into something really magical. I love Before Sunrise. It's definitely got to be on your list. Another romantic movie that I thought about was About Time, which I cried so hard watching this movie, but it is so good. The concept is a man at the age of 21 is told by his father that the men in their family are able to time travel. He can't change history. He decides that he's going to use his powers to get a girlfriend. So he meets Mary, who's played by Rachel McAdams, our rom-com queen. They fall in love, and he finally wins her heart using his time travel. However, as life progresses, he finds his ability can't shield him and those he loves from the problems of ordinary life. And it's really about the importance of living in the moment, living each day like it's your first, like it's your last, and embracing the craziness that is life. The next film on my list is another one of my favorite films, and it's Almost Famous. I did force Sadie to watch this, I think last year when we were watching Daisy Jones and the Six. And it's a semi-autobiographical story about a rock and roll journalist who goes on the road with a fictional band called Stillwater. He is a 17-year-old rock journalist. He's writing for Rolling Stone magazine, and he really embraces the rock and roll lifestyle and kind of learns along the way what's important and what's not. He also learns a lot about love, which I feel like that comes up a lot in these movies of your 20s, because there's a big difference between teenage love and 20s love, I think. It's also about the struggle of balancing independence and responsibility and trying to look cool and be cool, and also you figuring out what is actually cool. So I love that movie. I feel like it's a perfect summer movie because it's just so hot, like any 70s movie, really. Speaking of the 70s, the next movie I had on my list is Dazed and Confused. These are all, I feel like, coming of age movies, but this one's actually set on the last day of high school. So I feel like if you're in your early 20s or just about to enter your 20s, this is a great watch. Richard Linklater directed this. He also directed Before Sunrise, so we love him. He's our coming of age king. And this is about the generational clash between the grade 9s and the grade 12s. And it all takes place over just one night, just like his other movie. And it is very nostalgic, even though I wasn't born in the 70s. It feels authentic and like a real time, and it just makes you feel reflective, I think, of your youth, your high school years. And then it also kind of clues you in that you'll be reflecting on the time you're in now. The next movie on my list, I think, might be the oldest, but it is an essential, especially if you are just about to graduate or just graduated, and it is The Graduate. This movie stars Dustin Hoffman, and he's a character who's recently graduated and doesn't really know what to do with his life. It's kind of the idea of when you do everything right, but you still don't know what you want, what do you do then? And so he spends his time hooking up with a married woman, and that sort of spirals into madness from there. But it's also about making those choices and the consequences of your actions and trying to be brave when picking the future that you want. The next movie on my list is back into the romance categories, and that is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This movie is about a character who receives a note saying that his ex-girlfriend had him erased from her mind. So he decides that he is going to get her erased from his mind as some strange form of payback. And in the discovery of getting it erased, he realizes that they are truly soulmates and are meant to be together. So the whole movie is him trying to fight in his mind her getting erased from it. And this is just about the idea of the perception of relationships and what it truly means to be in a relationship and the idea of coincidences and soulmates. The next I had on my list was A Good Will Hunting. This is a classic. I feel like it's been memed and like mocked endlessly. I feel like there's probably so many Simpsons clips making fun of this, but it's so good. It's about Will Hunting, who's played by Matt Damon, and he is a self-taught math genius who is discovered and offered a chance at a better life. But he doesn't quite know how to grasp it. He's a self-saboteur, and he knows what he should do, but he can't stop himself from, instead of embracing what he knows he should, embracing the fun of living in your 20s. The next movie I had on my list is a movie we've talked about before on the podcast, and that's The Devil Wears Prada. This is very famous. I feel like it's having a renaissance right now, and it's great. It's about Andy, who's a college graduate who wants to become a writer. She ends up working as an assistant for one of the most powerful fashion editors in New York, Miranda Priestley. This is clearly supposed to be about working at Vogue, and I just love everything about this movie. It really highlights the struggles of starting your career. It is a big wake-up call to be like, this is what I'm supposed to do every single day. And you either embrace it and love it and find your calling, or you realize it isn't for you. There are some really great moments in this movie. I know that Sadie's talked about the way it highlights fashion and how there are so many little industries within industries within industries. And I feel like this applies to everything, not just fashion. So that's something I really love, but also just the reality of being a working woman and how difficult it can be to be balancing that, balancing your looks, balancing your relationship, wanting to do a good job at work, but also wanting to be treated fairly and figuring out where you draw the lines. These are all things that I think are different person to person. And I think that this movie really, really highlights that. If you are wanting to watch movies about starting your career, this is definitely a great place to start. Another career movie I had on my list was Office Space, which is kind of a throwback, I guess, from the 90s. And it's about a guy who works a corporate desk job and he really hates it. He works at a software company. While undergoing hypnotherapy, he's left in a state when his therapist dies in the middle of their session. He refuses to work overtime after this, and he plays games at his desks, and he just decides not to care. This is what he's hypnotized to believe. And unintentionally, this makes him beloved at work. He makes all new friends. He keeps getting raises and all these things. And so it's just about the monotony of everyday work, which again, I feel like is a big eye opener when you reach your 20s. You have spent your entire life figuring out what you want to do for work. Are you going to go to school so that you can do that for work, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get there and you're like, oh, I do this every single day for the rest of my life. So it's hilarious. Jennifer Aniston's in it. If you like her, definitely check it out. Sort of work related, but more school. I had the movie Legally Blonde. This is my ultimate September movie to watch. I love it so much. I find it so motivational. I feel like everyone knows what Legally Blonde is, but if you don't, it's about a character named Elle Woods whose boyfriend breaks up with her because he got into Harvard Law School and he decides that she's not serious. He needs to go there and get a serious girlfriend and get his life together. So Elle decides that she's going to go to Harvard Law School to win him back, which everyone else is like, that is ridiculous. Harvard Law School is really hard and you're a sorority girl who's bleach blonde. But nothing can stop her. She decides she's going to go for it, and hilarity ensues from there. It's also one of my favorite musicals, if you're a musical person. Kind of wild card movie on the list. We're up to number 14, by the way. This is Ingrid Goes West. This was kind of an underground movie, but I really, really liked it. Pop Sugar wrote about it. This hilarious dark comedy comments on millennials' obsessions over status, popularity, and of course, Instagram. A disturbed young woman named Ingrid, played by Aubrey Plaza, depletes her inheritance money to win the affections of an Instagram celebrity, played by Elizabeth Olsen. The comedy quickly becomes a cautionary tale when Ingrid crosses personal and legal boundaries to impress her idol. And I just feel like in today's day and age, this is such a good movie about meeting your idols, the realities of social media, and the dangers of social media. I just thought that it is so good. Anyone in their 20s needs to watch this, especially if you're like, I think I should just be an influencer. This movie's scary. Movie number 15 is one we've talked about loads of times on the podcast, and that's When Harry Met Sally. Arguably one of the best rom-coms of all time. The plot of When Harry Met Sally is, in 1977, college graduate Harry Burns and Sally Albright share a contentious car ride from Chicago to New York, during which they argue about whether men and women can ever truly be strictly platonic friends. 10 years later, Harry and Sally meet again at a bookstore, and in the company of their respective best friends, Jess and Marie attempt to stay friends without sex becoming an issue between them. I just feel like this movie accurately shows the ups and downs of dating in your 20s and thinking you found the right person and maybe you didn't, and how painful it is and how messy it is. The next movie I had on my list is Bridesmaids. I love this movie. This is about a character named Annie. She's a single woman. Her life is a mess, and she's asked to be the maid of honor for her lifelong best friend. Annie doesn't know how to deal with this. She tries to be supportive, but she has no money. She lives at home. She's single, and she's just very like, my life is falling apart. Why do I have to support you when your life is going so well? She also really struggles with jealousy and feeling like she's not good enough. And the reason I think that this movie is so good is it goes to highlight how you can keep yourself down. Like, Annie keeps herself in this headspace because she's just like, this is my story. This is all I'll ever be, is single loser Annie. And you can just get stuck by that. It also is hilarious. It goes into the ridiculousness of weddings, which is a huge part of your 20s, attending weddings, being bridesmaids, maybe getting married, that sort of thing. So it is so essential. The next movie I had is actually a book, but I love the movie too. So I'm going to talk about them both. And that's Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice follows the turbulent relationship between Elizabeth Bennet, the daughter of a country gentleman, and Fitzwilliam Darcy, a rich aristocrat landowner. They must overcome the sins of pride and prejudice in order to fall in love and marry. This is the best romance ever written. It's all about Mr. Darcy. He is the blueprint for everything. There would be no enemies to lovers without Mr. Darcy. There would be no Regency novels without Mr. Darcy. This is just an essential. And I think the key things you need to glean watching this movie in your 20s is the threat of Pride and Prejudice and how that can hold you back from your true love. It's also just an amazing piece of writing. I love the movie. Highly recommend. The next movie I had on my list is one I vividly remember watching for the first time in my 20s. I might have been 20, and it is just so good. It is Trainspotting. It's about a heroin addict, so that's kind of a bummer compared to some of the other movies I was talking about. But it's about heroin addict Mark, who stumbles through bad ideas and sobriety attempts with his unreliable friends. It's very bleak. It can show how good life can be and how bad life can be. I just find this movie so jarring, so shocking, and so motivational. Movie 19 I had on my list is The Last Holiday, which I know people hate, but I low-key love this movie. I watch it every single Christmas, even though it's not a Christmas movie. It just takes place during winter. And the plot is Georgia Bird, played by Queen Latifah, discovers she has a terminal illness. And she reflects on what she realizes has been an overtly cautious life. So she withdraws her life savings and jets off to Europe, where she lives like a millionaire. She charms everyone she meets, including renowned chef Didier. The only one missing from her new life is her longtime crush, Sean Matthews, played by LL Cool J. I just love this movie. It highlights why you should be living life to the fullest, not being too cautious, and how that can actually be holding you back. And it's just such a cozy movie. I love it so much. Okay, and we are at movie number 20 of 20. And this is kind of cheating because it is a movie, but I'm thinking of the TV show, and that is Sex and the City. You know, if you've listened to any of these podcasts, that Sadie and I are obsessed with Sex and the City. It's one of my favorite shows. I think it's one of the best shows of all time, especially when it comes to female representation in media. It's just so good. I feel like this will teach you everything you need to know about survival in your 20s and how shitty but how fun it can be. It's set in New York City. The series follows the lives of 4 women who, despite their different natures and ever-changing sex lives, remain inseparable and confide in each other. I love it so much. There are things that are problematic about it now, but it is also 30 years old, so that's fine. I feel like we can grant it some grace. Okay, so those were all of my 20 movies. I hope that at least one of these sounds interesting to you. I do highly recommend them all. I just feel like, especially if you're having a cozy day at home, these are so good. These have really shaped who I am, and I am going to be turning 29. So I have 9 years of life through my 20s. And these were the movies that really stuck out to me as ones I had seen either before I turned 20 or as I was 20. And I was like, yeah, they nailed the feeling. As I said, Sadie will be back next week. We will be back to our regularly scheduled program. So definitely follow and subscribe so you see when that new episode drops. We've got lots of fun summer content coming your way. You can also check us out on Patreon, which is the best way to show your support for the podcast. And all the episodes get put up there ad-free. So if you would like to support us directly and get to listen to all the episodes without ads, definitely check that out. You can also find us on social media. We're at Our Golden 20s on all the platforms. That's everything for this week. See you next Tuesday.